different types of harassment. Physical harassment includes intimidating gestures, threats, or actual physical violence or assault because of a person's race or ethnicity. Verbal harassment may include derogatory remarks about a person's skin color or appearance, unwelcome remarks about a person's culture, or racist jokes and taunting. Non-verbal harassment includes racist graffiti, negative stereotyping of particular ethnic groups, and written threats of a racial nature. Carol works for a small business and regularly puts jokes about various ethnic groups on the notice board in the staff lunchroom. Other staff members generally seem to find the jokes amusing. Kim is one of Carol's co-workers and a member of one of the groups that is sometimes the target of the jokes. Kim finds the jokes offensive. Could this be an example of harassment? That's right. Under anti-discrimination legislation, race is a protected attribute. Jokes about a person or group of people's ethnic origin may be considered racial harassment. Sexual harassment is harassment of a sexual nature and includes behavior like unwelcome sexual advances, unwelcome requests for sexual favors, and any other unwelcome conduct of a sexual nature where the person feels offended, humiliated, or intimidated, and where that feeling is reasonable in the circumstances. Examples of specific behavior that could be considered sexual harassment include unwelcome touching or other physical contact, unwelcome remarks with sexual connotations, insults based on sex, suggestive comments or jokes, and the display of offensive material of a sexual nature. Some forms of sexual harassment may also be considered criminal offences, such as physical assault, indecent exposure, sexual assault, stalking, and obscene communications. If a criminal offence may have occurred, the individual should report the matter to the police. Organisations should also have a nominated person that such incidents can be reported to. David and Amy are co-workers and friends. Lately, David has been sending Amy email messages, implying that she is having sex with her manager. Amy finds the messages offensive and has asked David to stop. Could this be an example of harassment? That's right. Because the emails are offensive and of a sexual nature, this may be considered sexual harassment. Work environments where harassing behavior is tolerated or encouraged may be considered hostile working environments. Examples of behavior that could contribute to a hostile working environment include displaying racially offensive or pornographic material, and the acceptance of crude conversations and offensive jokes as part of the workplace culture. Employees have a right to complain about how they are affected by a hostile environment, even if they are not targeted by the behavior. You should now have a good understanding about some of the types of behavior that can be described as workplace harassment and the legislation that applies to these types of behavior. Before we move on, you'll need to complete a short multiple choice assessment. You'll need to pass this assessment to complete the course.
15th of August last year, not 5 months after being named Australian of the Year, I received a threatening phone call from a senior member of a government-funded organisation asking for my word that I wouldn't say anything damning about the Prime Minister on the evening of the next Australian of the Year Awards. You're an influential person. You'll have a fear, they said.
Let's take a look at some of the types of behaviour that can be described as workplace bullying and the legislation that applies to that behaviour.
A fear for the future of our planet?
Workplace bullying can be defined as repeated, unreasonable behaviour that creates a risk to health and safety and that is directed toward an employee or group of employees. Unreasonable behaviour may include causing intimidation, humiliation, or harm to an individual or group within the workplace. In some circumstances, workplace bullying can cause legal action as a result of alleged discrimination, harassment, assault, or
After a
other
year
illegal
of being
behaviour.
re-victimised,
One-off
commodified,
unreasonable behaviour
objectified,
that is not
sensationalised,
repeated and does not
delegitimized,
amount to
misquoted,
bullying
gaslit
may
and
also
thrown
cause
under
this.
by the biased mainstream media,
Workplace bullying
despite my
includes
inclusive
physical
messaging.
contact or
I would just like
coercive
to take
behaviour,
this
derogatory or intimidating verbal and written statements
opportunity to have a
made
glass of
directly
water.
or through a third party, continual
And
unjustified
thank you
and
for reminding me
unnecessary
that I really
comments
have
about a
nothing to
person's
lose.
standard of work or
The
capacity for
Australian of
work.
the Year Awards program
Pictures,
is an
posters,
institution.
cartoons, graffiti,
So
or
too
written
is our
material
parliament.
that may be offensive or
So
obscene,
too is
threatening or
democracy.
abusive
I
communications,
respect that
such as
wholeheartedly.
telephone calls, facsimiles, or
politicians,
messages on
like
email
all
or computer
individuals,
networks,
are
stalking an employee within the
human.
workplace or to or
And
from
although
work,
we, the
and
people,
derogatory or
elect
dismissive
them,
treatment.
as per the institution of democracy, to be our
Other
leaders,
examples of
our
workplace bullying
examples,
include name-calling and unwanted nicknames, gossip or spreading rumours about someone, threatening gestures and inappropriate body language, assigning meaningless tasks unrelated to a person's role, and changing work rosters to inconvenience a particular person. From a legal perspective, workplace bullying is generally considered a health and safety issue. Under health and safety legislation, employees and employers are both obliged to make sure that the workplace environment is safe. This means protecting employees from both physical and mental injury. If workplace bullying involves a protected attribute, it may also be covered by the relevant anti-discrimination legislation as a form of harassment. Ryan is an apprentice chef who feels increasingly anxious about going into the workplace. Though Ryan produces work of a standard similar to the other apprentices, the head chef constantly singles him out and finds fault with his work, calls him names, and throws dishes he has prepared into the bin. The head chef occasionally slaps the back of Ryan's head to make a point. Could this be an example of bullying? That's right. The head chef's criticism appears to be unreasonable, and both the physical contact and verbal abuse could also be considered examples of bullying. You should now have a good understanding about some of the types of behaviour that can be described as workplace bullying and the legislation that applies to that behaviour. Before we move on, you'll need to complete a short multiple choice assessment. You'll need to pass this assessment to complete the course. In this part of the course, We'll take a closer look at how to identify behavior that could be considered bullying and harassment, and some types of behavior that are considered acceptable. Identifying bullying and harassment in the workplace can be helped by understanding some of the reasons why people behave this way. Reasons that people bully and harass others include the thrill of exercising power, insecurity, career competition, a history of the targeted person being a victim of that type of behavior, peer pressure, a negative workplace culture, values and beliefs, such as holding racist or sexist attitudes, and inaction from an employer being viewed as approval of the behavior. Anybody in the workplace can potentially be involved in a case of bullying or harassment, whether as a victim or an offender. Bullying and harassment can be directed toward men or women, by co-workers toward employees at the same level, by managers toward employees at a lower level, or by employees toward managers or supervisors. Bullying and harassment can also occur between employees and anyone that they interact with during their employment, such as contractors, customers, or visitors. Behavior that can be considered bullying and harassment can occur in any type of workplace, from office, retail, healthcare, and education, to transport, mining, and construction. People working in some of these workplace environments may feel that the behavior is acceptable, as it is considered a typical part of the culture in that type of workplace. Regardless of the workplace environment, the laws protecting people from bullying and harassment still apply, and behavior that could reasonably be expected or anticipated to humiliate, offend, intimidate, or distress could be considered bullying or harassment. Behavior not intended to cause offense may still be considered to be bullying and harassment. It is important to look at the actual behavior and the impact it has, rather than passing it off as just a joke or part of the company culture. The feelings of the victim may also be taken into account. One way of determining whether behavior can be considered unreasonable is the reasonable person test. This means asking, would a reasonable person, considering all of the circumstances, expect or anticipate that a person targeted by the behavior would feel humiliated, offended, intimidated, or distressed? The reasonable person test should take into account the impact of the behavior on the victim, but should also consider the nature of the relationship between the parties, the history of any other communications and contact between the parties, community norms of the day, all of the circumstances surrounding the conduct, and any other matter a court or tribunal may consider relevant. The victim of the behavior does not have to complain about the behavior for it to be considered bullying or harassment. Emily has just started at a new place of employment when she is approached by a co-worker, Lachlan. Though Emily doesn't really know Lachlan, he asks her if she would like to go out for a cup of coffee. Emily tells Lachlan no, and though Lachlan is slightly embarrassed, he does not pursue the request any further. Is this unreasonable behavior? That's right. Applying the reasonable person test to this scenario would suggest that this is most likely not an example of bullying or harassment. Though Emily might have been slightly uncomfortable with the request, it was not explicitly of a sexual nature and could be considered a reasonable social request. Also, there is no history of communication between Emily and Lachlan to suggest other intentions. A few weeks after the initial invitation, Lachlan starts regularly approaching Emily and asking her to go out with him. When Emily turns him down, Lachlan starts circulating jokes about Emily via email. The nature of the jokes suggests that Emily is stuck up and likes sleeping around. Is this unreasonable behavior? That's right. Lachlan's jokes could be reasonably expected to offend, and it doesn't matter whether or not Emily is aware of them. Behavior outside of the usual work environment may also be considered workplace bullying or harassment. Incidents occurring at workplace-related events, such as after-work drinks, Christmas parties, sponsored seminars, and business trips, may be considered workplace issues. Bullying and harassment may also occur on social networking sites. The effects of behavior in these forums can be significant, as they are usually public forums that are accessible to a wider audience and permanently record and display comments made online. All employees must be aware that their behavior in these public forums may have consequences in the workplace. Not all behavior that we don't like can be considered workplace bullying or harassment. Some examples of behavior that is acceptable and not considered workplace bullying or harassment include expressing differences of opinion in a courteous and respectful manner, providing constructive and courteous feedback, providing counseling or advice about work-related behavior and performance, or making a legitimate complaint about an employee or manager's conduct if the complaint is made in a proper and reasonable way. Carrying out legitimate or reasonable management decisions or actions undertaken in a reasonable way and with respect and courtesy is not workplace bullying. This includes taking action to transfer an employee, allocating work to an employee and setting reasonable goals, standards and deadlines, making a decision not to select an employee for promotion, warning employees about unsatisfactory performance, and transferring or terminating employees. In this activity, you will need to identify acceptable behavior for employees and managers. Drag the notes showing acceptable behavior to the right. Drag notes showing unacceptable behavior to the left.
Ông xin lỗi chiều cái bồ người ta phải nói lâu gì làm gì mà cái bồ mấy sau khi lâu thì làm gì mẹ có chiều của tiền nào phát nào rồi cô chỉ chưa có So, we are now here. I think you're done. We get every man. But someone here, you're a good Yeah.
Carrying out legitimate or reasonable management decisions or actions. In this activity, you will need to identify acceptable behavior for employees and managers. Drag the notes showing acceptable behavior to the right. Drag notes showing unacceptable behavior to the left. Carrying out legitimate or reasonable. In this activity, you will need to identify acceptable behavior for employees and managers. Drag the notes showing acceptable behavior to the right. Drag notes showing unacceptable behavior to the left.
Where am I?